Appreciate his sharing that song with us today. I asked him to sing it because I knew that song would turn our hearts and minds towards Jesus and our meeting him when we lay this life aside. That song, it's got us thinking, doesn't it, about those initial moments that'll take place just, after we die, when we stand before Christ. But I want us to move beyond those initial moments to what will take place after we have been welcomed into heaven. You see, in the Bible, the word heaven appears more than 500 times, and it's used in different ways. Sometimes the word heaven in the Bible is used to describe the sky. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth can mean the sky. We can talk about the sky in one sense, where the birds fly, where the clouds are at. So the Bible uses the word heaven to describe the sky. It uses the word at times to refer to the universe beyond the sky, to outer space, to that which holds, the sun and the moon and the stars and the galaxies. And then sometimes the Bible uses the word heaven to describe the special dwelling place of God. Now, certainly the Bible teaches us that God is omnipresent, that God exists and lives everywhere at the same time. But the Bible also teaches us that God chooses to dwell in a special way in this special place known as heaven. And I want to zero in this morning on some of the things that the Bible teaches us about the heaven where God dwells in that special way and where followers of Jesus are going to live when their time of living on this earth comes to an end. So what will that heaven be like? What kind of place is it? Well, let me begin by saying that heaven is a real place. Several times in the course of my preparing this morning's message, I did some internet searches, typing in the word heaven. And in one of those internet searches, I looked to see if there were any recent news releases containing the word heaven in them. And as you can imagine, with the World Wide Web and billions of people, throwing stuff towards it, there were some. One of those in particular that caught my eye was something that People.com updated and published just 12 days ago. Its headline was this: Arnold Schwarzenegger says he doesn't feel comfortable with death. And it says, and it quotes him saying, "I'll miss everything." Well, I read just enough of that article to become very disappointed with the former governor of California, who claims that heaven is a fantasy, and who, in answer to the question, what happens to us when we die, said this: nothing. You're 6 feet under. Anyone that tells you anything else is a blanking liar. Only he didn't say blanking, of course. I was really disappointed with what I read of his thoughts about heaven and where he's at. At the same time, I felt for the old guy. And he's 10, 15 years, no, not 15, but he's a good 10 years older than I am. And I felt for him because of the fact he's got in him this growing sense that his death is looming on the horizon. And for him, what is it? That's all she wrote. Because in his mind, heaven is a fantasy. Listen, friends, the Bible assures us that heaven is not a fantasy, but that it is, in fact, a real place. And for the record, I just want to encourage you to take mental note of the fact that even though none of us has seen some places, that doesn't mean those places aren't real. I was joking with a coworker at Menards the other day about how I'd come up with an answer to my wife's question, when she asked me, honey, what would you like for Father's Day? And I said, I have to think about that. And I was joking with this guy at Menards, and I said, I came up with the answer. And so I get home, I'm going to tell my wife I came up with the answer. You asked me, what do I want for Father's Day? I said, I got it. I want tickets to the Cubs Cards game in London. The guy responded, oh, Darren, man, that would be awesome. London is awesome. He says, man, have you ever been there? He says, I've been there. And he started talking to me about this metro system. He says, oh, they got this awesome metro system. It makes it easy to visit all these places of interest, all the museums and the castle and all that stuff. Well, friends, I've never been to London. And I didn't get the tickets for the game to Father's Day. I got this shirt instead. By the way, I love the shirt, hon. In any case, the fact, folks, that I've never seen London in person. I've never been there. I've only seen it in news clips. I've only read about it in books. I've only heard about it from people who have been there. That doesn't make London any less real, right? I mean, because of the things that I've read, because of the things I've seen on pictures and on the web and on the newscasts and stuff, because of what Chris told me, about his being there, I believe London's a real place. Never seen it, but I believe it's there. And the same thing, I can say the same thing about heaven. I've not seen it yet. I've not seen it. But because of the things I've read about it, because of the word pictures, and again, they didn't have photography back in Jesus' day. What they painted were word pictures, and the Bible's full of word pictures about heaven. Because of the word pictures that are here, because of the fact Jesus came from there and told us what it's like, I believe heaven's a real place. When Jesus talked to his disciples about heaven, he didn't introduce the idea of heaven as if he were like Mr. Rogers inviting the kids to take a journey in their mind to the land of make-believe. No, what Jesus said, he said this in John chapter 14. It opens this way. John chapter 14 opens with Jesus saying, "Don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms." Speaking of heaven. My Father's house has many rooms. And if that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me so that you also may be where I am. Heaven's a real place, friends. Heaven's also, we need to know this. We need to let people know this. Heaven's also an exciting and fun place. Mark Twain had Huck Finn reject any real interest in heaven by saying, all a body would have to do is go around all day long with a harp and sing forever and ever. Another well-known author, Stephen King, who has spent the bulk of his career writing about death, more recently in a 2014 interview with Rolling Stone magazine was asked, "Do you hope to go to heaven?" And he responded, I don't want to go to the heaven that I learned about when I was a kid. To me, it seems boring. The idea that you're going to lounge around in a cloud all day and listen to guys play harps? I don't want to listen to harps. I want to listen to Jerry Lee Lewis. The notion that heaven's going to be a boring place, it's out there, folks, and it occupies the thoughts of a lot of people. The popular show, The Good Place, portrays heaven in that kind of light. A little FYI, in case you're not aware of it, The Good Place show is supposed to be heaven. And anyway, in one episode of The Good Place, a resident says, you get here and you realize anything's possible. And then you do everything and you're done. But you still have infinity left. And this place kills fun and passion and excitement and love. Now, on top of that misguided and misinformed notion about heaven being boring, being portrayed by that particular resident of the place and in the overall show itself, in its last season, residents of the Good Place are giving the opportunity, if they've grown bored of the place, to escape the boredom. The way out that they're given involves their walking through a certain door, and doing that apparently will bring an end to their existence. How sad. I mean, how sad, folks, that so many people think heaven's going to be a boring place. It's not, friends. Heaven's not going to be boring. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. And how do I know? Well, for one, there's the fact that Jesus described entering heaven as entering into the joy of his master. He didn't say enter into the boredom. He said enter into the joy. I don't know about you, but anytime I've been joyful, I've not been bored. But you know what, to me, it really says heaven's going to be an exciting and fun place is that Jesus compares the kingdom of heaven to a marriage feast. Now, I have been to wedding receptions, and I think, this is different. Okay, you have to understand, Jesus he walked the earth in the first century in Jewish culture. And the way I understand it, wedding feasts were exciting and fun events in first century Jewish culture. They were like, a party that everybody in the community just wanted to be a part of. We're not going to be bored in heaven. We're going to have an awesome time there. It's going to be more exciting and more fun, folks, than anything you or I have ever experienced on earth. As one preacher put it, this world and its history are prelude and foretaste. All the sunrises and sunsets, symphonies and rock concerts, feasts and friendships are but whispers. They're a prologue to the grander story and an even better place. Friends, heaven is an exciting and fun place. Heaven's also a beautiful and, in the words of Elf, ginormous place. It's ginormous. Let me say something a little bit about the size of heaven. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly how big heaven is going to be. But one of the things it does do for us is it describes the size of its main city, the New Jerusalem. In Revelation chapter 21, verse 16, that city is described as being in the shape of a cube, and every side of it is 1,500 miles wide. So it's 1,500 miles long, 1,500 miles wide, 1,500 miles high and deep. You got the whole thing, okay? And folks, that's crazy big when you think about that being a city. I remember once when put this in perspective, I remember once when I lived in Indiana, having to make this pastoral visit to somebody who was on the north side of Indianapolis. Now, any of you who are familiar with the city of Indianapolis know that they have this bypass highway that goes all the way around the entire city. And I was coming from the south of Indy. And to get to where this guy was at the north, I drove half of that bypass. I went around the east side of the city to get to the north side. Now, when I left his home and decided to come back, I thought, I'm gonna shake it up, man. I'm gonna live wild life. I'm gonna drive the west side on the way home. And so that day, I drove the entire loop around the city of Indy. And I remember one point when I was getting closer to, I was about halfway down on the west side, thinking, man, this is a long trip around the city. It's taking a long time to get around this thing. And in all honesty, the whole trip probably just took a few hours, just a couple hours to get all the way around the city, including all the traffic. To put the size of the city of the New Jerusalem in perspective, I want you to think about this. To put it in perspective, think about this. If you were to drive a car around the New Jerusalem, and say the highway is right next to it, all just right at the very edge, no space, just right there at the edge. If you were to drive a car around the edges of the city, and you're driving 55 miles an hour, nonstop, no potty brakes, nothing like that, no stops for gas. You're driving an electric car. It's a hybrid. It's in heaven, no waste, none of that stuff. And you're driving around the city of heaven, okay? Understand this. It would take you 4.5 days just to drive around it. Thinking in terms of the city being a skyscraper, where every floor requires 14 feet of structure, we'd be looking at a skyscraper, folks, more than 560,000 stories high. Heaven is ginormous. And it's beautiful, too. It's beautiful, I believe, beyond description. We've all heard how it's described in the book of Revelation as having streets made of pure gold that is so pure that it's nearly transparent. We've heard how the city's gates are these giant pearls. The walls are made of precious, metals and gems. But let me just tell you something that really opened my mind to the wonder and the majesty and the glory and the beauty of heaven. It was this work of art created by a janitor that was discovered in his garage after he died. That work of art is known as the throne of the third heaven. And this is what I'd like for you to show, the one slide that I got ready for this morning. Can we pop that slide up there? Maybe. Well, while they're trying to get that, let me just share this, okay? What they found in this garage of this janitor that had passed away has become a national treasure. It can now be seen at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American Art in Washington, D.C. And what this quiet janitor named James Hampton created, it involves 180 pieces, from tables to chairs to small decorative items. Hampton simply wanted to depict God's throne room. And this extraordinary collection, it was found in his garage after he died in 1964. And I want you to get this about that. Nobody knew he had been working on it. He'd been working on it for 20 years, and no one knew it. And all the pieces, they were made from cast-off items. Old furniture, gold, aluminum foil from store displays, bottles, cigarette boxes, wine bottles, rolls of kitchen foil, used light bulbs, cardboard, insulation board, construction paper, desk blotters, sheets of transparent plastic. And they're all kind of precariously held together with glue and tape and tacks and pins. And there on the bulletin board in his garage, he had copied this verse from Proverbs 29, verse 18. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Hampton believed that people needed a vision of God's glory, and so he set out single-handedly to give it to him. Now, folks, no one knows very much about James Hampton, but we know this. What he imagined as God's throne room has become a national treasure. And when I saw that work of art, and I saw that we got the slide up there. When I saw that work of art and recognized it as a thing of beauty created by a man, basically, get this, out of junk, it made me wonder. It just filled my mind with awe at the thought of Jesus and what he has been preparing for us. I mean, Jesus, in his creating of heaven, not only has available to him all the resources of the universe, but folks, Jesus has available to him any uncreated thing he chooses to call into existence. Heaven is going to be beautiful beyond imagination. Now, heaven is a shared place. You can drop the slide, please. Heaven is a shared place. As I listened to the Cubs game yesterday, I heard the announcer say that they had a season-high attendance at the game, that more than 40,000 people were in attendance. Now, if you don't think that crowd added to the excitement of the day, then all you need to do is think back to ball games and what ball players had going through their hearts and minds, what fans had going through their hearts and minds during COVID. Do you remember what it was like when they first started playing baseball during COVID? I mean, it was so depressing for the players and the fans. I mean, it got so bad that they started putting those stand-up photos of people in the seats. And then they started playing recorded responses across the sound systems at the ballparks, just so people would get, pumped up a little bit about these games. Well, part of the good news and the exciting news about heaven is we're going to share heaven with a lot of people. I know Jesus, we've been taught many are called but few are chosen, but understand the few that are chosen still number as many. Few among all that have lived still create a number that's many. We're going to share heaven, not with everyone. Like I pointed out last week, we're going to share heaven with those people who have put their hope and their trust in Jesus Christ. We're not going to share heaven with everybody. We're going to share with lots and lots of people. Everyone whose name appears in the Lamb's Book of Life will be in heaven. And the Apostle John, who was given this vision of heaven that they wrote about in the book of Revelation, in Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, said, he saw in heaven a great multitude which no man can number. And that multitude was made up of people of all nations. It's going to be a shared place. Because of the size, you're not going to feel crowded, by the way. I was thinking back to my own home and growing up with my brothers and the six of us in that house. And by today's standards, a lot of people say, well, it was a fairly good-sized house, but it's not nearly as big as some of these houses that are around here today. But I never felt crowded. Heaven's not going to feel crowded, but it's going to be very well populated. Not only with people, but with angels. Again, drawing from John's writing down of his vision that he was given in Revelation chapter 5, verse 11, he says the number of angels that he saw was 10,000 times 10,000s and thousands and thousands. The idea there is clearly that there's going to be an enormous number of angels in heaven along with all of these people. And we're all going to share our existence in that place together. And of course, we're going to be sharing heaven with Christ. Now, more on that in just a couple of moments. For now, I want us to move on and say that heaven is a holy and a worship-filled place. It's a holy and worship-filled place. Just as the word heaven is used in multiple ways in the scriptures, the word holy is used in the Bible in several ways. And one of the ways that it's used involves this idea of uniqueness, of something being one of a kind. God is described as being holy in the sense that the Bible teaches us there is none like him. As we sang this morning, there is none like him. And I get from the Bible that heaven is a one-of-a-kind thing, that there's nothing else that has ever existed or will ever exist in the future that will compare to this heaven that Christ has prepared for us. We've already caught a glimpse of its size and its beauty. I want us to catch a little glimpse of its worship. I read this week in an article by Kay Warren how she described on the spur of a moment, she responded to an invitation that she ended up taking part in the welcoming home of some military members of the military who had been overseas on a mission. And she described as the soldiers came off the plane, how the people were waving flags and cheering for the members of the military, how there were lots of hugs and kisses from family members and friends, and how some of the soldiers, by that warm and awesome welcome, were moved to tears. And then she went to draw some comparisons to the welcome that followers of Jesus Christ will receive when they arrive in heaven. And I thought for a few moments about that welcome. I thought of the people there that'll greet me. Of course, with this being Father's Day, I thought of being greeted by my dad. I thought about being greeted by my mom. I thought of others too. But the thought that most occupied my mind was the idea of being greeted by Jesus. I can only imagine how I'm going to react in that moment. I can only imagine as I thought about the reward that would be bestowed upon me at that moment. I was moved to tears, and my heart was moved to the very core as I was thinking about hearing from Jesus the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And the idea that Jesus might put a crown on my head, man, it just blows my mind. And even though it's not happened yet, I have this understanding. I have this sense of what I'm going to be doing in response. I believe when that moment takes place, I will, with great appreciation, accept whatever gifts Jesus has decided to give me and whatever words he chooses to say to me. But I believe even now that I will recognize in those moments that I'll not have earned any of it. And I will know fully in my heart and mind that I am only there because of his grace towards me. And I know deep down, even now I know, when that happens, I will not want to receive any of the praise. I will not want any of the focus to fall on me. I will instead want to turn all the glory and praise back to God. I'm thinking I'll probably take my cue from the 24 elders that are before the throne of God. We're told in Revelation chapter 4 how those 24 elders fall down before God and they worship him. And they lay their crowns before the throne and they say to him, as we sang this morning, "You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and by your will they were created, and they have their being. I know now what it's going to be like then. I think in that one-of-a-kind place is heaven. I know this. I know it's not going to be about me. And it's not going to be about you. It's not going to be about us. But it's going to be about Him. It's all going to be about Him. Heaven, you see, is a holy and a worship-filled place. Heaven's a forever place. King David understood this. He understood that while his time on earth is limited, his time in heaven is going to be forever. He ended his most famous psalm, the 23rd Psalm, with these thoughts about heaven. He said, surely goodness and love or mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will what? I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Friends, the same can be said of every single follower of Jesus Christ. We will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. G.I. Packer said it very well. He said, hearts on earth say in the course of a joyful experience, I don't want this to ever end. But invariably it does. The hearts in heaven say, I want this to go on forever. And it will. And he said, there can be no better news than that. And lastly this morning, well, there's so much more that can be said about heaven. Lastly, I want to say about heaven, that it's the one place we can truly call our forever home. I know I've shared with you before how it bothers me that some of those HGTV programs end with somebody commenting about this newly remodeled house that they are moving into, that this is now, they're so happy, they're so thrilled that they've now found their forever home. And I get it. I get the idea. I understand their sentiments. But understand this, it's simply not true. That newly remodeled home isn't their forever home. Even if they live the rest of their lives in the place, it's not their forever home. No house on earth will ever be anybody's forever home. This earth is not going to last forever. But the scriptures assure us that heaven will. And what are some of my favorite verses that describe heaven? The Apostle John wrote this, found in Revelation chapter 21, verses 1 through 4. Revelation 21, verses 1 through 4, John wrote this. He says, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and He will dwell with them. They'll be His people, and God Himself will be with them and be their God. And He'll wipe away every tear from their eyes. There'll be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Yes, this world is temporary, but heaven is eternal. And as for the Christian, heaven will be his or her forever home. Listen to what Leith Anderson writes about heaven. I really appreciated his thoughts. He writes this, my family and I have lived in the same house for 17 years. We've lived there more than twice as long as I've lived at any other address in my entire life. I'll sometimes refer to it as our house, but more often I refer to it as home. What makes home isn't the address or the lot or the garage or the architecture. What makes it home is the people. You may live in a bigger or newer or better house than we live in, but as nice as your house may be, I would never refer to your house as home because the people who are most important to me don't live there. So what makes home home is the people and the relationships. And then he adds, and what makes heaven heaven is not the streets made of gold, the great fountains, the lot of fun, the fact there's no smog. That all may well be, he writes. Actually, I think the heavens is going to be far greater than our wildest imagination. He said the same God who designed the best of everything in the world also designed heaven. He took it to a far greater extent than anything we've ever seen. Yet that's still, he says, not what makes heaven heaven. What makes heaven heaven is God. It's being there with Him. I totally agree with what Leith Anderson wrote there, that what makes heaven heaven is God. But I just kind of wish Pastor Anderson had taken his comments one step further and added this. And in the same way, what makes home home is the people in the relationships. What makes heaven our forever home is God and the relationship we're going to share with him there. As the worship team returns to the stage, I just want to remind you of what I shared last week, that no one gets to heaven. No one gets to go into the Father's house except through being in a right relationship with Jesus Christ. As we sing this next song, each of us, friends, has an opportunity right where we are to think about our relationship with Jesus Christ and whether or not we are trusting him to get us to heaven.